Hey everybody, this is Dean with the Two Party Podcast. I'm here with Maxwell Ivey. He goes by Max, and so I'm going to let him. He's just going to bring us some knowledge. We're going to have a good conversation here, but I'm going to have him introduce himself and just tell us a little bit about himself, a little history, and we'll go from there. Hey Max, how's it going?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Dean?
I'm doing great. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Max.
Right. Yeah. I am a totally blind man who grew up in a family of Carnival owners. All I ever wanted to do was to be part of the family business and eventually run my own show someday. I also knew that I would eventually lose my vision or most of it to retinitis pigmentosa or RP. But that didn't keep me from being involved in the family business, from graduating from a regular high school and college, from achieving the rank of Eagle Scout. I was blessed to get to work alongside my dad and brothers for over 15 years before his death caused the closure of our small carnival. And then I started my own business helping people sell used rides called the Midway Marketplace. And I had to learn so much stuff in order to do that business. This was 2007, which was before WordPress, Wi-Fi, or Facebook.
Right.
And, I had to learn how to hand code HTML. I had to figure out how to recruit clients and set fees and manage media, and then eventually how to deal with social media and build an email list, and just doing the next thing that came down the line to promote this business and try to support myself and my family. And people said, Max, what you're doing, the way you take on these difficult challenges with joy is very inspiring. We want to hear more of what it's like to be an entrepreneur who happens to be blind, and that led to the Blind Blogger. And since the Blind Blogger started and I've been accepting my role as an inspiration, I've written 4 self-help books, the latest being the Blind Blogger's First Speaking and Signing Adventures, How You Can Conquer Your Fears. It's part 2 of a 3-part series on my travels. I've been on over 250 podcasts, shared my story on stages and at local advocacy groups, sing in public, help other people get exposure by booking them on podcasts. And I started my own show, What's Your Excuse? And it seems like I am always coming upon new opportunities and new challenges. And I think the honest truth is I just need to have something to be curious about or distracted by, and to kind of make things easier when I'm doing those things that I know I'm good at, that I've been doing a while, but, just aren't as interesting as the new things. So for those who think I don't have the shiny object syndrome, shiny objects don't just exist in the cash and credit department. Sometimes we'll let ourselves get distracted by other things and stop doing what we're good at. So over the years, I've been lucky. Friends and family and online community people have suggested new challenges. And as I tell people often, one of the best things can happen for you is to have somebody you trust, somebody that knows you better than anybody else, to have that person double dog dare you to do something that scares the heck out of you.
Yeah, that's true. It's funny you say that. Growing up, I was always the kid, and all my friends know this. A lot of my friends in the audience watching know this about me. I was that kid that if you told me it couldn't be done, I was the one that was like kind of a hold my beer. I was the one that if you told me it couldn't be done, I was going to show you how it could be done, even if it was at my own detriment. And most of the time it was. Usually it would be some stupid stunt with a car or a motorcycle, and I'd end up crashing and getting myself injured or something dumb.
Yeah. Well, it's a shame that didn't happen, more recently, because who knows, you could have been an X Games star or something.
Well, yeah. I mean, I did race for I raced Yamaha ATVs and stuff like that. I mean, I've kind of been around the block a little bit, but I tell you, 2001, as a matter of fact, I got paralyzed. I was in practice on an ATV and broke my neck, got paralyzed from the waist down in an accident. Just kind of playing around, doing some tricks and stuff. And so yeah, I'm a little familiar with that, but I've always been that guy. If you tell me it couldn't be done, I'm going to show you it could be done.
Yeah, well, I have a good friend that I met this spring at a podcasting event. His name is Mark Daniels, and he was paralyzed, I don't know exactly when, in a rollover truck accident. And he's now working with some other cats down in Florida to develop an exoskeleton. And at this conference, he actually stood up and walked with the aid of this exoskeleton. He says they need to develop it a lot more before it'll be something people can use in ordinary everyday use. He said, but you know, Max, the first thing he did after he got through with his rehab is he went out to the woods. He said, you know, I've always been the guy who hunts and fishes and kayaks and camps. He said, I was going to prove to myself I could still do all of that stuff even after being paralyzed. So I can totally understand it. And, you know, that was actually part of my problem when I first got started is I would look at people like you and Mark. I'd also look at people like Eric Wehamir, who's a blind adventurer who's climbed Everest and the other 6 summits and recently rafted to Colorado through the Grand Canyon.
That's amazing.
Yes, it's crazy. That's bona fide crazy. You know, what I do is just crazy compared to what most sighted people will do. But what he did, that's bona fide nuts.
Yeah.
You know, or Rachel Skadoris, who's finished the Iditarod a few times, or Tom Sullivan, the blind entertainer, entertainer who happens to be blind, because if he hears I said it the other way around, he'll kick my ass. But, you know, I would look at people like that and I would think, okay, I'm not doing much of nothing. Those cats are doing crazy stuff. I'm just, you know, I've got a blog, I got a website, you know, eventually I have a podcast. And so I really had to be told, it had to be explained to me that, you know, Max, the reason your story is compelling is you have a perfect excuse to sit at home and do nothing. You know, if you wanted to sit on the couch and watch TV and eat junk food, nobody would say the first word about it, except maybe one of your family members.
Right.
You know, somebody you live with, yeah, they might say that, but the rest of the world wouldn't care. But there are so many people who don't have a built-in excuse that keeps them from showing up, and yet they still sleepwalk through their days. They still don't challenge themselves. They don't take action to go after the goals they do have. And because you have an excuse and don't use it, and because other people don't have excuses and don't do anything, that's what makes your story compelling, regardless of whether or not you think you're a big deal. So I'll probably never accept the fact that I have the effect that I do on people. It'll always be a surprise when people say that. But I've come to a conclusion about this whole subject of being inspirational. And what I've decided is that, yes, the fact that I, you know, do things that scare me or that are difficult for me is inspiring. I understand that. But if you're going to call me inspiring, tell me what the hell I inspired you to do.
Right.
Because inspiration without action is meaningless. Mm-hmm. You know, inspiration, reading a self-help book and then not doing anything with what you just read, that's entertainment. That's not inspiration.
Yes, I would agree.
I got to remember that line. That was a good one. I got to write that one down. I got to write that one down.
Yeah, you need to. I would agree. You know, it's interesting. And you mentioned what the condition was that got you, that you lost your eyesight to. My wife suffers from glaucoma. She was diagnosed very young, which was very unusual, but she was diagnosed probably in, I want to say when she was around 27, 28, and she's had glaucoma. She's had one eye lens replacement. She's had an OMID valve put in. That eye she is now completely blind in, legally blind in. And then her left eye, they just did surgery on and replaced that lens. And so she's now 36 and she's now legally blind. And so I understand a little bit of what you go through. You know, obviously it's a different condition, but it's been real hard for her. A just being young, and B, you know, she has very high anxiety and depression, and so that kind of escalates everything into being a little worse for her because you know she being with her, I understand she loves to read. There's a lot of things she loves to do, and she's really good at art and stuff, and she knows how in the future that's going to affect her. And just this past year, she's had a lot of downturn with her eyesight. So it's gotten a lot worse in the past year. How have you managed to, I mean, with your condition, how have you managed to do all the things you do?
Right. Well, first off, I want to say that I totally understand what she's going through because a couple of the things that I really miss these days are drawing, coloring, crossword puzzles, things that really there is no substitute for, but I would like to give her a little bit of encouragement here. There's a company in Austin, Texas, I think, and I don't know the name of it, but I will find out, or she can Google it. Sure. They've created a process where you can draw with raised line drawings, and you can even erase your raised lines, and you can have the lines cross over each other, so you can actually do very detailed outline drawings of whatever it is that's in your head.
Huh.
And we're also starting to have three-dimensional braille displays where people can get a tactile representation of what something actually looks like. And there's a company in Israel that's pairing these 3D displays with digital cameras so that people can use them for travel mostly, but I could see how it would be very applicable to people who want to maintain their love of art, of sculpture, of things like that. So those are some of the technology that's coming along. And, you know, there's new clinical trials every day on gene therapy. Unfortunately, neither me nor her are eligible for the electronic computer implants because we both have too much vision. In my case, I've been diagnosed with light perception, but under the FDA rules, they will only do the implants if you've been declared totally blind. So I say totally blind because it makes conversations simpler. But technically, I do have light perception, which allows me to see if a light is on or off, if it's a bright light, and if I'm looking directly where it's supposed to be.
Right.
But those are a couple of things that might encourage her. There's also been a recent 60-minute story. Well, it was replayed this week. It was recent, like a year or two ago, of an architect from San Francisco who lost his vision and is still designing buildings and things. And it could have just been for the interview, but I think he was sincere when he claims that he actually has learned more about architecture since he lost his sight than he ever knew beforehand. So those are just some things that
really
might encourage your wife.
Yeah.
And he might be somebody you want to reach out to get on your show. I've tried to get him on my show, and his people told me no, he didn't have. He didn't have time for my
little
show.
Guys.
Well, yeah, but I have the sense you're bigger than I am.
I don't know that if I'm bigger, but you know, at the end of the day, I think we're all about the same. You know, we all just try, and there's some people that you can't. You know, I have a hard time dealing with a lot of publicists, so I have a hard time getting through publicists. To even get interviews, you know, sometimes people are just, and I don't want to say that some people just kind of get an ego about things, but they do. They kind of feel like, well, you know, I'm known for this, and therefore you're gonna have to earn my time on your show.
Well, that's part of it. I think the other part of it is just overwhelm. Just so much crap you have to do in order to do anything. For example, I used to disagree with people when they would go, Max, you do so much stuff. There's so much stuff involved in a blog. How do you do that? Because I have trouble doing it sighted. And of course, I use a screen reader on my laptop, tablet, and phone. I get help where I can. Sometimes I hire help. Sometimes people volunteer. Sometimes friends and family, I can ask them to do stuff for me. Mm-hmm. So I don't do it all myself, and a lot of it is technology. But I think with people, you know, authors, podcasters, people who are well-known, that there's just so many demands on their time without publicity that they just want somebody to be the gatekeeper and, you know, keep the 70, 80, 90% of the people away so that when they do say yes, it doesn't feel like they're drowning themselves in things to do. So I will give some of them the benefit of the doubt, but I have had some of the same problems with publicists. And you know me, I'm known for being one of these people who, if I tell people, if you don't ask, they can't say yes. So I ask a lot.
Yep. You got it. You have to.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't get told no a lot, surprisingly. I think that's because I send authentic, unique, custom emails to people when I ask them to do stuff for me. It's not like 3 words. Hey, I need you to do X. No, I don't do that. That doesn't work never worked for me. So I do a little storytelling. Then I go, well, you know, you'd be perfect. Could you do this for me? And most of the time they say yes. And that's one of the cool things about having a podcast actually is with the exception of the super famous, wealthy, and super rich.
Yeah.
Most people, if you ask them to come on your show, they'll go, sure, I'll do that. And I've only had a few cases where they've said no, and I pretty much expected them to say no before I asked, but I asked anyway. One of my personal experiences that I think is one of the best lessons I can teach people in this area of asking was when I won the Amtrak Writer in Residence Award in 2016. I used my prize to go to New York during the Christmas and New Year's holidays on a crazy solo trip that I People will probably have already gotten tired of hearing me talk about that story. But when I applied for it, I looked at the past winners and I looked at the judges and I said, Max, you're not qualified for this. There is no way in heck they're going to say yes. I actually remember thinking to myself, Max, this is like that Sesame Street song. Which one of these is not like the other? And I'm thinking, you've got people who've had their plays produced in summer stock. You have people who've won multiple book awards. You have people who their books have been turned into short movies. And I'm like, man, I've written one book but it was a competition based on writing rather than on social media reach or on whether or not you were famous. And they said yes, and I was very happy that I submitted. But that's the way it is. A lot of times we have to, and it's great if you have friends who will do this for you, but a lot of times you really have to do things before you're qualified, before you're ready, before you're good enough.
Yep. It's I found getting into this industry and stuff, what I found is it's a lot of times you got to step out of your comfort zone. You got to push yourself into doing things that the normal average person or even yourself normally wouldn't want to do or wouldn't do. Prime example, like we were just talking about, I've reached out to several just celebrities and, and I won't name names because I'm hoping one day they'll change their mind, but I've literally reached out to a few and caught their managers, got past the publicist to the manager, and they're like, "Yeah, we'd love to be on your show. 10 minutes, $1,000." And I'm like, "Whoa, hey!" I'm like, I was like, we're not at a point where we want to pay $1,000 for a 10-minute interview, but maybe in the future that'll change. And so I've had several that it's been like $400, $500, $1,000 just to be on the show, and I'm like, I'm not so sure, not to take away from anybody and their achievements, but I'm not so sure I'm willing to pay for somebody's time. If they don't want to genuinely give a personal interview, I'm kind of one of those that's like, on to the next one. There's a million people in the world that would probably love an opportunity to express their talent or their ideas on a talk show, not just mine, but any show. And I feel like, why... At this level, why should I be paying? Now, if I was, had a talk show on TV primetime, maybe I'd have the budget for that. But yeah, I've ran into that. And sometimes I think, man, why would I pay $1,000 for this guy? And again, I won't name names, but I'm like, I thought of him as kind of a cool celebrity. I thought, man, this guy would be great to have on the show. And then when you reach the manager and the manager's like, yeah, $1,000 for 10 minutes, I'm like, maybe that guy's not as cool as he looks on TV.
It's funny you're telling this story because I was on a podcast earlier this week. It was my second visit last Friday. It was my second visit with the show. In between, the show host had needed a guest, and he reached out to me and said, Max, I'm doing this show on this subject. Do you know anybody who would come on last minute? I said, sure, I know 2 or 3 people who would be perfect. I'm sure one of them will do it. And I did find him an awesome guest, Lorraine, regularly at wordingwell.com, who is the editor of my books and one of my most amazing friends I've had in my lifetime. She decided to go on the show and talk about having been raped as a teenager while she was still a virgin. And so her overcoming all of that crap in her life. And she was a perfect guest for the guy. And the guy said something about that to me Friday. I was like, you mean I can charge hosts for delivering ideal guests to them? I never thought about doing that before.
Right.
I said, I'll be sending you my PayPal link after. I'll be sending you my PayPal link after we're through here. Never knew I could charge hosts for guests, but maybe I should think about it because, I do really think about the host. I'm not going to suggest somebody who, is just totally outside of what the host is looking for. And I've actually, as a publicist, I've actually had people post reviews of me that pretty much said that that Max delivered an ideal guest. And that's what I want to do. I don't want to make things harder for anybody. I want to make things easier for them. And that's one of the best things I can teach people when it comes to being in business, especially online. The most valuable thing you can do to generate future business is to solve somebody's present problem. And if you can help them today, if tomorrow they need what you have, I guarantee you, they are going to come back to you to get it.
Right. Yeah. The it's interesting. I found, a lot of the relationships that I build and that I find are literally just that. It's from helping somebody or even somebody just helping me, and those relationships tend to stick. And somehow or another, we make a great connection that way. And I've met so many amazing people just through, whether it's just through the podcast show. I've had guests that have reached out to me that thought they wanted to be on, but then they were like, well, we're not sure what you guys talk about. They hear the name Two Party Podcast and they're like, well, we don't want to talk politics. And I'm like, well, that's the thing. It's not, even though the name, first thing that comes to everybody's mind these days when you hear Two Party is you immediately think of politics. And for me, when we started the show, it's literally about two parties. It's you on one end and me on the other. It's a two-party podcast. And a lot of people, as soon as they hear the name, they're like, no, we don't want to talk politics. And I've had a few that are like, we're ready to be on the show. And then as soon as they hear the name, they're like, oh, well, no, but I can send you somebody. And I'm like, okay. And they'll send me somebody and they want to talk about politics. And I'm like, well, let's just do it. Let's just talk about politics if that's what you want to talk about.
Right. Well, let's call this whole thing out. I actually was one of the people who said that to you. I said that on Matchmaker FM. I said, look, I like the idea of what you're doing, but if the show is about politics, then I won't do it. And I said, but I'll send you people. And then you're like, you explained to me, and I listened to you when you explained to me what the podcast was really about. And then I'm thinking, well, I got to do this podcast. And then I've got like 12 people I know who would also be great for this podcast. And so that's one of those things where, your assumptions can really bite you in the butt. And so, but it does really come down to listening, because when you wrote back and you said, hey, this is what we do, and we only talk politics if the guest wants to talk politics, or if we're talking about something in the news that relates to the guest, I'm like, sure, because I know I have many friends who will want to talk about other things in their life, but if the conversation goes towards politics, they'll be fine with it. I'm just not one of those people, because I quite frankly get more politics than I ever want to get in my own life, and I don't really want to do that to other people. I'm just like, I'm one of these people. I'm out there telling people to turn the news off and watch the cartoons or the Nature Channel instead. But,
Amen.
I got 100 and something channels on my cable box that I'm paying $165 a month for. I'm going to get my money's worth. I'm not watching all these. And worse, Texas has become a, quote, battleground state, unquote. That means that both sides think they can win here. And trust me, when both sides think they can win somewhere, your TV goes to hell.
And everybody else loses.
This is true. This is so true. I mean, I have a friend in Pennsylvania, which is a regular battleground state, and we were having a conversation on the phone last week, and in the process of a 35-minute phone call, she got 12 text messages from different political candidates wanting to know if she was going to vote and who she was going to vote for. So that's why I don't do politics. But you're right. People, they're like, well, two-party, it must be politics. And then when you tell, then they're like, well, I'll send you people who want to talk politics. But that isn't what you're about. It's just, I think the two-party kind of should remind people of back in the day when people had party lines.
Correct.
And there would be 6, 7, 8 people on the party line, and you basically got to use the phone when nobody else was using it.
Correct. And I look at it like, nowadays people just, we're so busy with our cell phones. We're so busy staring at screens nowadays. Everybody has social media. And so the way I kind of looked at it when we originally were going over with, a couple different names for the show, that was the reason I liked the name of the show is Two Party, because you don't really have people having discussions anymore in communication. It's not the same as it used to be when you or I was growing up. Nowadays, everybody's got a phone screen stuck to their face. You can't call. If you call somebody, it's considered rude these days. You're supposed to text them first. And back when I was growing up, you go knock at a door, you go call somebody, you call somebody. You just don't have that intimate conversation anymore, which is why I liked the name originally Two Party Podcast, because it's literally about two parties having a great conversation, having a good time, getting to know each other. And that's really the point of the show. And we do it unfiltered. We do it unfiltered because we want, I don't want to just narrow my guest base down to, Mother Teresa and the crew. I want to be able to have, if a guy wants to come on and cuss like a sailor, I want him to come on and cuss like a sailor if that's how he feels. Because I want to get the real feel of having a conversation with somebody and get to know who they really are.
I agree with you. You don't want people filtering and censoring themselves. And my general approach when I have guests is, look, if that's the way you talk, fine. But if it's not the way you talk and you're doing it for effect, then please don't come on my show. So,
It's a little over the top. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but I like the name. I think it's one of those things that once people figure out what it is, it will definitely be a great brand.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things you're going to have to build up an explanation to people. And to me, that's where your past guests have to come into play. People that have been on the show have to show their gratitude by not only sharing their episodes, but explaining to people, look, the Two Party Podcast, it's not politics. You know me. You know I wouldn't do politics.
Yeah.
It's about two guys hanging out, or a guy, and if it's a woman on the other side hanging out, and having an authentic, honest conversation that will hopefully inspire or educate or entertain people along the way. So
Yeah.
it's on your past and future guests to help explain the brand and build it to where people don't automatically assume politics in the future.
Well, that's what I keep hoping. But I want to rewind a little bit there, Max. You mentioned that your father and you were looking at one point having a career in like the Carnival and stuff like that.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about your dad and the Carnival life and stuff like that. Tell me a little bit about that. I'm interested.
Well, we had a 7, sometimes 8 ride Carnival. We traveled mostly in Texas, but in the summers we would go. Some years we went up into Kansas and Nebraska. Some years we went into Alabama and Tennessee, trying to escape the heat of Texas and look for better work during the summer. But most of the time I traveled with him because we never had enough help. And the idea is that if Max has to help set up and take down rides, that's fine. But if he doesn't have to, and he can ride along with Dad and maybe help Dad change a tire or something, then that would be better. So I did the bookings, I operated kids' games, I ordered stock for the food and game trailers. Spent a lot of time going up and down the road in raggedy old pickup trucks, listening and singing along with country music and having great conversations with my dad, understanding the value of silence at sometimes, I think that he probably, if it weren't for the Carnival business, he could have been an actor. If it weren't for the Carnival business, he could have probably been he probably could have been one of the greatest self-help gurus of all time, because he had a lot of life learned wisdom that I was lucky enough to pick up quite a bit from him along the way. And one of the things that he taught me from an early age, because people knew that I was going to lose my vision, was, Max, don't ever be afraid to ask for help. One, because if you don't, you're going to make things harder on yourself. Things are going to go badly if you don't ask for help. And people like to help others. So that's one of the things he taught me. More than once, I got to see him do his storytelling, because he was a master at getting us out of traffic tickets and other penalties from the Department of Public Safety or the local law enforcement. And he taught me important things like Max, don't ever argue about things until you're in the next county. He always said, no matter how bad the week was, Max, tell them you'll come back next year until you are out of town a ways. Then if they call you at the house, you can say, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that again next year. And
that's the best time.
Things but he would always, when he got stopped, he would always tell them, look, I understand you're just doing your job. If you have to write me a ticket or put me out of service, that's fine. I'll understand. But hey, I'm a guy. I'm just trying to make a living. And and of course whenever we got stopped, his South Carolina down home Southern accent got thicker, and he used a lot more y'alls and you'ns and I mean, the guy, I tell you, I rode up and down the road with him for 15 years, and when he died, I still couldn't tell you if he was telling me the truth or not.
He was pulling your leg on some of that stuff.
Oh, yeah. I once saw him tell a state trooper that the trailer we were trying to get home had been stolen and wrecked in a lake. You
Got to
know,
throw a few fish on there.
you know, he didn't have no fish, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had thought about it. You know,
That's great.
I was personally with him more than once when got stopped, and there were other trucks also stopped. Where when we would leave, the other truck drivers and the other officers would just shake their head and wonder what the heck happened, because they were sure we weren't going nowhere. But that was the value of good storytelling, you know. And
right.
he also used to say, you know, Max, I like having you along with me, but for a couple of reasons. He would say, one, you don't have to talk all the time, which is good. He said, we like the same music. He said, that's good. He said, but the most important reason is, I don't think most cops would be in a hurry to put you in jail overnight with me.
That kind of makes a little bit of a protection for you there.
Yeah, but I used to enjoy helping with the steel. We had one ride, a older roller coaster, bigger than a Go-Gator, but nowhere near a park coaster. And that was one ride while we had it. I always got to help set it up and take it down, because without me, it took 4 guys. With me, it only took 3.
Yeah.
Because I could carry the weight of 2 guys on my side of the pieces of roller coaster track. So that was one.
I don't think people understand how really hard it is to do that, to go town to town, break those down, set them up. I mean, obviously when you're doing it for a while, you kind of have a system and you're used to it. But I think people kind of just take for granted when they go to like a state fair or one of these carnivals, how much effort it takes to build one of these things.
Right. And the bigger operations have large staffs. They have heavy equipment. So I think for them, it's probably easier. But for a small operation, if you don't do it, it probably doesn't get done. It's a very hard way to make a living.
Yeah.
You know, setting up and taking down when stuff would break, when, you know, you're trying to make opening, but a truck is on the side of the road somewhere. Some weeks we would spend the first 2 or 3 days at a new location without water, sewer, or electric, but we still had to go through the work of getting things ready to open on. Because the one thing the carnival life will teach you, especially the way I grew up in it, is that the people in the next town care absolutely nothing about you or what you're going through.
Right.
All they care about is on Thursday night, can they ride the Ferris wheel and buy a cotton candy or a funnel cake?
Correct. I was going to say there better be corn dogs, funnel cakes, and cotton candy, or it's on.
Yes, exactly. And we only missed one opening in our entire history, and that was a time when one of our relatives who was driving fell asleep and ran his personal vehicle off of the highway. Injured his wife, and one of his children eventually passed away from the accident. That was the only time we ever missed opening, and we thought that they would give us the contract back for the next year, even though there was one ride still on the trailer and another big ride that was only halfway put together. But nope.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have it. It was like, and that's the lesson you learn. It really doesn't matter what happens between Sunday night and Thursday night. It doesn't matter. And when you spend, 15 years doing that every week, or at least 40 to 50 weeks out of the year, it really prepares you for what we're doing nowadays, man, because you get really good at finding creative solutions, at finding the positive in whatever bad has just happened to you, or just plain laughing at it when nothing else works. So, think about being a podcaster. We were talking about before we went on about how you were having trouble with Zoom, and I've got people fixing on my house, and who knows if we would get disconnected or not. It's just those sort of things are, really helpful in the online world where things change minute to minute or day to day, and stuff that worked last week doesn't work anymore. I mean, think about how many bloggers 5 years ago made crazy money.
Yep.
Because they were in the early days of blogging and there wasn't a lot of competition yet. Or think about some of the podcasters that they worked their butts off for a year or 2 or 3 years. And, now people are having to pay to be on their shows, So, things that worked don't work. Some things quit working because people realized it's just not sustainable. the whole idea that you have to post a new blog post every day, I'm glad that stupid myth went away. Or that the one I try to help people with, the one I try to help people with a lot now is this whole idea that just because you only see one face on the screen doesn't mean they're doing it by themselves, doesn't mean you're supposed to be doing it by yourself. It doesn't mean you're a failure if you're doing it by yourself and you're not financially successful yet.
Yeah,
you know,
I think there's a lot to be said for, especially just in my case, there's a lot to be said for the people that help you that are not in the scene. So the behind the scene help. You know, if it weren't for my wife supporting what I do all the time, I would not be here doing this, because she would send me to go find a second job or a third job. That's just how my wife is. She would say, you know, I get this is your passion, but go out and make some more money. Because, you know, it is hard to get off the ground with a podcast. It is hard to get to a point where you're actually monetizing and making enough money to actually be able to call it a job. And a lot of people will never reach that point. And for me, this all started as a hobby that I just enjoy doing. I enjoy being in the studio. I enjoy making music. I enjoy working on different soundtracks and stuff. It's just something I've always just got into. The podcast kind of came out because, as my wife says, I never shut up and I like to talk. So it's kind of a gift of gab for me. And I get to have a hobby and also use something I'm actually gifted at. And I enjoy people. And that's the other thing. But like you just said, I mean, off the screen, there's so much support. You know, if it wasn't for my wife, my son, just other people locally that have supported the show, and a bunch of my friends that have really reached out and subscribed and follow and just kind of keep up with me, you know, then it wouldn't really be a show at the end of the day. But it's interesting that, you know, a lot of people, you know, they see the face and, you know, being the face on the screen or being the voice on the show, there's so much more that goes into it. You know, booking guests, like you said earlier, sending out emails, making them professional, being able to communicate on different platforms, and being able to use, like for me with press credentials, being able to use my press credentials to reach out to certain publicists and stuff that a lot of people may not have access to. And so all of that stuff just ties together to bring together a good show. But at the end of the day, it's the guest. To me, it's always the guest that makes the show.
You know, I didn't realize this, but now, man, I feel I hate to say it this way, it's going to sound egotistical, but now that I realize that you have press credentials and I don't, and over the years, most of the time people have said yes to me, man, I'm feeling really good about myself, man.
You know,
not that I don't most of the time, but I mean, you know, it's one of those things. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves just how difficult the thing we're doing is. And that's not just for me because I'm blind. That's for everybody. You have to think, you know, because sometimes in the middle of doing the work, you know, you just don't think about it. But we have to remind ourselves. And just now, you know, I said that. I'm like, well, he has press credentials. I don't. So that means that in a lot of cases, they are less likely to listen to me. My emails are more likely to go in the spam folder. So that's one of those moments where instead of just, you know, talking past it, I'm like, wait a minute, that's important. I need to notice that for Max. And hopefully for the people that are listening, they'll realize, you know, Max is a pretty accomplished guy and he still took time to recognize something like that. So I hope that what we just did here is teaching a lesson. Yes, it is hard.
And I was going to say, and it's hard even with or without credentials, because when I started this, I didn't have those credentials, you know. And so at the end of the day, with or without the credentials, but even with the credentials, it's hard. But without the credentials, just shows how much more you're working and how much harder you're working to reach people and to do these things. Because, you know, it's real simple for me to send something to a publicist and say, look, I'm with this network or this agency. Here's my credentials. Versus somebody just coming and sending an email and them saying, well, you know, what's this guy's credentials, you know? But that just shows how much harder you're having to work. And even before I had my credentials, how much harder I had to work for guests.
Right.
And
but you can overcome that.
It is difficult. And it's hard to make those communications. You know, I would much rather be able to meet people. You know, I'd much rather be able to go to an agency and talk to the publicist in person versus have to send emails sometimes, because I feel like we talked about earlier, sometimes like when we initially, you heard the name of the show and stuff, it was kind of like, well, I don't want to talk politics. It's kind of one of those things. If I'm in person with somebody, I can have a personal relationship and a conversation where we're going to understand each other by looking at each other eye to eye, versus the communication of email or text never gets across the message you want sometimes.
Right, which is why I really emphasize storytelling. I coach my students and my clients on the whole idea that hosts don't book you, your product, or your service, or your show. They book your story. So when I send my emails, I get to my story or the client's story right away. I want to hook the people that are reading that email. And even with the subject line, you know, when I'm using email as opposed to a service like Matchmaker, the subject line even is going to have something in there, because I want to get right to the person's story. I want to make it hard for whoever's going through their 1,000 emails that day to click delete. I want them to think, well, this
hard
is
for
cool.
them to miss that one.
Yeah. And here's something I've started doing in my submission forms that I'm going to share with you, not because you need it, but because maybe it'll help your audience. If you have a nickname that you're known by, or a brand name especially, when you fill out the forms, a lot of these forms, the only field that has a restriction on it is the email or the website. Those fields will know whether or not you're actually putting in an email address or a website URL.
Yep.
But rarely do the name fields know that. So what I like is, if I get a submission form where it has first and last name, I'm known as the Blind Blogger. So my first name is the Blind Blogger. My last name is Maxwell Ivey. I do that all the time because I want somebody to be thinking, I don't know any blind bloggers. Is it even possible to blog as a blind person? Which I still get asked that question.
Yep.
And so if you have a brand name, put your brand name in there. Let them see the brand name before your name.
Yeah,
because
that's a great idea.
Sometimes that's all it takes to slow somebody down enough to make them look at your submission or your email. And even emails from me, when I write people emails, it'll come from justask@theblindblogger.net. But I will then put in the subject line, it'll say, the Blind Blogger would be an amazing guest. I don't know if they realize it's from me or from or they think it's from a third party, but you know, I want to get that in the subject line, because most people don't have a lot of contact with blind people. But so, you know, for people that have a brand name, use the brand name in the forms as your name. Use it in the subject line. Use it in your email address. If your email address is still your name at AOL or your name at Gmail, you need a second email address that somehow squeezes your brand name or your nickname, assuming it's a clean nickname, into the Gmail address. Because these are, you know, people, when they're going through hundreds of emails, sometimes all you need to do is to slow down for a fraction of a second.
Yep.
If you can make them slow down, then you got a shot. So that's why, like I say, when I send emails or when I send messages on systems, I always start with the story. Get them to want to hear more about the story, and then you got a chance. Even with a big agency, I tell you what I find funny is when I get emails from publicists and I read their email and I'm like, this person is a professional publicist that's probably charging a lot more money than I charge people to get them on podcasts.
Yeah.
And if I didn't, you know, if I wasn't generally an optimistic sort of person who's always thinking that next person could be great, I would just press delete on this email. And I get those. I'm starting to get those myself from publicists. And you know, just this morning I got one from somebody. All they wanted to do was do a blog post, and I was like, "Excuse me, your client's story is so good. He should be on my podcast." I said, as a matter of fact, if he wants to, we should record some music together, or he should play and sing on my podcast. You know, those are the kind of things most people, you know, they get the tunnel vision. They think of doing the work that they're doing, and they don't think beyond the initial need. And if somebody has bothered to find out anything about me or my podcast, they'll know that I love to sing. They'll know I sing on my podcast or in interviews. And they'll think, you know, my client is a musician. You know, what can we do with that? But most people, it's just go down the list of show host names and send them the same email I sent to every other host. And sometimes they'll change the name of the show they're pitching, but a lot of times they don't even do that. So, Be unique, be original, be creative, and tell your story, even if you don't think your story is important enough yet, because that's what's going to get you booked.
Yep. Tell me a little bit about this book you wrote.
Well, it's my fourth book. It's the second in a series. The first one of the series is the Blind Blogger's New York City Adventures, How You Can Make Your Dreams Come True. And we talked a little bit about that earlier.
Yep.
This latest book is called The Blind Blogger's First Speaking and Signing Adventures, How You Can Conquer Your Fears. And speaking of misunderstandings, I'm having to explain to people that no, that doesn't refer to sign language. It refers to book signings. Even a couple of reviewers have wondered about that. So, but it fits with this event. The book chronicles a 6-week period in 2017 when I went off to do my first public speaking and book signings to promote myself as an author. It talks about missed trains and canceled events and running short of money, but it also talks about experiences, new people I met, new clients that hired me, having the opportunity to spend some wonderful quality time with relatives I hadn't seen in 30 years because of events falling through, and just the methods that I use. Each chapter has key takeaways, and then at the end of the book, there's like 100. They're all put together in one place, and I encourage people who read the book to just, copy or tear out that last section and carry it around with them, because there's a key takeaway for just about any situation. And that's actually my editor's idea. She suggested I start doing that in the first book, and people liked it. So I listened to her because she seems to know more about it than I do. I went to Philadelphia, and the interesting thing about this book and the story that is included in this book is I went to originally I was going to Philadelphia to do one talk. And, speaking about not knowing how big the thing you're doing is, I never thought about, hey, I'm a blind guy going to travel solo over 1,500 miles to go give a talk. Right. In Philadelphia, 5 of the other 8 speakers mentioned exactly that and how inspiring it was. And I'm hearing these very accomplished speakers from the microphone at the front of the room talk about me when they should be talking about themselves. And even one lady that talked had an amazing story, Erica Blocker. She's like found out her husband had a whole nother family. And I'm like, now that woman overcame some stuff. Right. That woman overcame some stuff. And she's talking about me. And she actually said before it started, she said, Max, I only agreed to talk this week because I figured this might be my only opportunity to meet you in person. And I'm like, you came here to meet me, so. But I was originally going to do one event and come home. But once I announced that I was going to Philadelphia, other people offered. Al Chase and his fiance, I guess you call her Deb Bazile in Buffalo, said, if you come up here, we'll help you get a book signing and do some other fun stuff. And then the School for the Blind in North Carolina originally invited me. A woman I had sold a train to in Columbia, South Carolina, originally invited me. The thing at North Carolina fell through because it turned out I was going to be there too close to finals and the end of their semester. The thing with the woman with the horse, she was having problems with the arena that they were building. So, but I got to spend time with my Aunt Paula and her family in South Carolina. And sadly, since that trip, 3 of the people that I spent time with while I was there have passed away.
Wow.
So my Aunt Frances, Paula's husband, Mark Garner, and my Uncle James Vernon, all 3 of those have passed away since I was there. If I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have ever got to see them again. We had this amazing night where about a dozen of us sat out on Paula's back porch, and there was a guitar and singing and music, and a few beers were drank, and some food that wasn't good for anybody was eaten.
Sometimes that's what you need. I really like. Again, kind of like we discussed earlier, like people just don't communicate anymore. And when I hear stories like that, it's just, to me, that's amazing. People getting together, a guitar, some beer, and just family getting together, having a family meeting, and just having a good time. That's what life really is about.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I was really hoping and that I would teach people from this book. And one Well, my most favorite review of the book basically says that this guy has been there and done that, and he knows the fears of authors. One of the things I really wanted to do was to teach people, I know you're going out in the world to promote yourself, but that doesn't mean you have to schedule every minute of every day as work. It doesn't mean that you can't schedule in, or when things go wrong, allow time in to do things that are fun, distracting, or maybe things that you've thought about doing but never really wanted to do them. So, but you know what I'm talking about. These people, they go out on these book tours and they come home, they're tired, they're cranky, they're dehydrated, they're maybe even sick.
Yeah.
And they're like, no way in hell am I ever doing that again.
Right.
And I wasn't going to be that person, and I didn't want to give the impression that other people should be that person when it comes to promoting themselves. So
yeah, I mean, you want to be energetic, and you want to show that you genuinely care, and that and at the same time, why not make it an experience? Like that's what you did with it. You made it an experience in each visit and each place you went, and that's how it should be.
Yeah, but how many people are doing it that way? How many publicists are booking their clients that way? How many people are thinking that's even good for their business as an author or a speaker? And the answer is nobody.
Yeah. It's become more business than anything these days.
Yeah. And I mean, if I wanted a job, or I could have, back before I joined up with the Carnival, I worked for the Internal Revenue Service for 2.5 years, two and a half of the most miserable years of my life, because I was working in automated collections. So everybody that called me had gotten a letter telling them that the IRS could do all these unspeakable things to them if they didn't pay up now.
Yeah, there's no friendly conversation to be had there.
So, I mean, there are jobs out there. If I wanted to work at an actual job, 9 hours, 10 hours a day, I could probably get one of those jobs. But so why, as a creative entrepreneur, as an author and a speaker, why would I want to basically turn my passion into a job if I don't absolutely have to? And I think that's the way it is. I think most of these people believe, because they've been told, that when you go out on a book tour or a speaking tour, you have to put your body to a test. You have to run, to scream, to pack everything you can into every minute of every day, and it all has to be related to promoting yourself. And so who knows, maybe the thing here is I just have a different brand than everybody else does. My brand is a lot of my brand is about enjoying the experiences, even if they weren't pleasant experiences. We can always learn something from the bad days. And as you know from checking me out, I'm not afraid to talk about the bad days and to tell people what I learned from them, and that there have been a couple occasions where even I was knocked on my ass and stayed there for a few days or a few weeks before I got back up and went back to being Max again. So, but maybe it's just my general approach to life, my brand. But I really do hope that if you read that book and somebody wants to book for the purpose,
there we go, we're getting a little bad
for their blog, or more than people free to the book, they say the part. Okay, well, crap.
There we go. It's starting to come back a little bit.
To the end of the. Okay, is that better?
That's a little better.
Oh shoot.
There we go.
I didn't really do anything then. So.
Yeah, I think it's between the two of us. I think one or the other is just getting a bad signal. Well, let's do this real quick, Max. Let's go ahead and I'm going to give you an opportunity to kind of tell us where we can find you. Tell us some of your website, where the audience can find you for the blogger, the blindblogger.net, and just the different areas where people can find you, find your book, and then let's leave it at that.
All right. Okay. So yeah, you can go to theblindblogger.net. You can also send me an email to justask@theblindblogger.net. Most everything I do always goes back to the website, because I believe that I want to funnel people to my real estate instead of sending them somewhere else. But social media links are on there. People can also listen to the Blind Blogger on Alexa or Google. They can also say, Alexa, play What's Your Excuse, and they can listen to the podcast. If they think that they have a great story and they want to be on the show, just click the contact form or the email link I just mentioned. I'm also on Roku on Knob TV, KNOB-TV for people who have Roku. The books, of course, you can find me on Amazon. And one of the great things about my two latest titles is if you put the Blind Blogger into the search engine on Amazon, you will find me. I wish I'd have been smart enough to add that to my first two book titles, because that would have really been helpful. So, over on Amazon, look for the Blind Blogger, and I'm trying to think if there's anything. Okay, and then as far as me goes, I'm available to coach people on overcoming their excuses or on asking for what they want and need. I do public speaking, so I can share my stories either virtually or in person. The books I've already talked about. I offer online training to be a podcast guest or to book you on podcasts and radio shows so you can share your story and promote your brand. And then, finally, the main thing I want people to know is I honestly believe this, that anytime I connect with somebody new, it is an opportunity to make a new friend and to see what life will bring for both of us. So you do not have to want to book me, hire me, or buy something from me in order to talk to me. And I mean that sincerely. I also want to make sure that I don't forget to tell you guys, look, without people like Dean and Two Parties Podcast, there wouldn't be the Blind Blogger. There wouldn't be What's Your Excuse. I would have made some progress, but nowhere near as much as I have. And so be sure and support people like Dean. Dean, I really appreciate you and this opportunity, because sincerely, I couldn't have become who I am without the opportunities that I get from people like you.
Hey, I appreciate having you on, Max, and I'm a little short on time today, and I know we're having some connection issues between the two of us, but I am willing in the future. I want to get you booked again so we could spend a little more time. Just like you just said, I look at every guest interview as not just having a guest on my show to promote the show or to promote the guest. I look at it as building a relationship and building a friendship. And, I want to get you back on the show so we can dig a little deeper into Max and who he is. I really enjoyed this interview, and I hope to get you back on here soon.
Well, I'll tell you the same thing I tell you when people ask me if I'll sing. Don't ever ask a singer if they'll sing. Don't ever ask a podcast guest if they'll come back on your show or not.
Well, you have a great day.
You too.
I'll reach out to you again. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.